bring in the panel now with Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun joining us from Melbourne and Radio 2CC breakfast host Stephen Senatiempo in the nation's capital. Wow, what a day, hey? The coalition is no longer. Susie, these two parties, the Liberals and the Nationals, have always, through the coalition, been greater than the sum of their two parts, right? And they're just throwing that away.
Oh, look, they're definitely both stronger together, and it just seems like the Nats, took a gamble, called the bluff, and they couldn't pull it off. And this is going to be absolutely disastrous for them. They're not going to have anyone in shadow cabinet. It seems as if Susan Lee was willing to support a number of the things that they wanted. She couldn't absolutely guarantee it, but it seemed like there was enough agreement. But that wasn't enough for the Nats, and they've taken their ball and they've gone home. And I think, they must be licking their wounds right now. That was a massive gamble that has not paid off.
Yeah, I think it's a real worry, Stephen. I understand the policy imperatives that the Nats want to cling to, but it's unrealistic to expect Susan Lee to give them guarantees on that now. You've got to get the coalition functioning and then thrash out those policy ideas. If they can't deal with the Liberal stance on those policies a month or so down the track, well, then maybe you'd pull out. But they haven't even really given it a crack.
No, see, Chris, I've got to disagree with you here. I think the fundamental difference here is the Nationals know what they stand for, the Liberal Party doesn't. And if you look at Susan Lee's press conference this afternoon, she said as much. We need time to work out what we believe in. I mean, this is the problem with the Liberal Party. It has lost its identity, doesn't know what it stands for. When we look at the demands that the Nationals, or the ones that we are told are the demands that the Nationals put forward, they were infinitely reasonable. Now, the National Party did not lose any of its seats.
Let me just jump in and let you finish, though. But those are all existing policies of the coalition. So they're not scraps, they're existing policies. And all Susan Lee has said, well, I can't guarantee they stay yet. We've got to thrash all this out. But there's obviously got to be a very good chance they stay, especially if the Nats stay in the coalition.
Well, if that's the case, then I think I think this is only a temporary split, and I think the coalition comes back together if the Liberals do get their act together. But the problem the Liberals have got is, and as I say, it's identity. The Nationals know exactly what they stand for, they know who they represent, and that's why they didn't lose any seats. The Liberal Party doesn't know what it stands for, and if you listen to all the rhetoric from its various members that have come out, I mean, it's been an absolute media rabble since the election, where the few members of the Liberal Party that have come out and spoken, they don't know what they stand for. They're saying that what we need to do is listen to the people who don't want us to win. We need to listen to what our opponents want, and that's how somehow we're going to win an election. No, they need to come up with a cogent policy platform. And if Susan Lee can't guarantee things that are already coalition policy, that were infinitely sensible, but they just couldn't sell at the last election, then they've completely lost the plot. And I think the Nationals are far better off being apart from it at the moment.
Well, I mentioned earlier that the great man, former Prime Minister John Howard, is appearing on Andrew Bolt's program tonight. We've got a little snippet of that interview. I haven't seen it. Let's have a look.
I am very sorry that this has happened, and I urge both parties to work overtime to put the coalition back together again.
There's John Howard. That full interview will be with Andrew Bolt tonight. But, Susie, this is the point. I mean, John Howard knows more about this stuff than anybody else has forgotten over the years. And he went through the Joe for PM thing back in '87. He knows how important it is. And he's worried that in this time apart, they'll grow further apart. What if the Nats scrap net zero and the Libs sort of scrap nuclear or whatever? Then they're suddenly heading off in opposite directions.
I think they've already started heading in opposite directions, because under Susan Lee, the Liberals have to move more into the sensible middle, and under Littleproud,
absolute
the
rubbish.
Nationals are moving further to the right. And I think, you look at some of those policies that those Nationals are hanging on to with dear life, like net zero, opposition to net zero by 2050, and also the nuclear policy. They were not popular at this latest election. They didn't enunciate what the nuclear. Stephen's angry at me. They didn't enunciate the nuclear policy well enough, and also amongst younger voters that they desperately need to get. Junking net zero by 2050 is the worst possible thing they.
Yeah, well, they haven't done that, but they might do it. Your response, Stephen?
Well, the thing about net zero is we know that net zero by 2030 is not possible. So, you know,
Or
you
2050
need to
even.
enunciate. Okay, well, or even by 2050. It's not possible. So if you can enunciate that policy, you fix that problem. And all this rubbish about moving to the sensible centre, if the Liberal Party wants to move to the sensible centre, they need to move further to the right, because for the last 2 decades they've been moving towards the left. Now, everybody wants to paint a different narrative, but we need to start telling the truth, and they need to start waking up to themselves that what they need is centrist conservative policies, not this rabid lefty follow the leader stuff and all this Me Tooism that they went to the election with. Look, you know, stand for something. Anything will do.
I think they've got to stick with those policies that the Nats want, but it looks impossible. I think you're both right in that kind of way. I just want to get your personal assessments, if there's time. I'll start with you, Susie. Susan Lee, the first Liberal leader, first female Liberal leader. You've got to feel for her personally, losing her mum in the last week. The coalition's fallen. The pressure on her. She hasn't even named a front bench now. Now it'll be a huge front bench because they're all Liberals. I mean, the strain on her is enormous.
Yeah, the Herald Sun had a really nice, or News Corp papers had a really nice interview with Susan Lee about losing her mum, and she was alive long enough to see her daughter get elected to that position, and they sat around and enjoyed that moment. So that must have been at least one nice thing for her. But yes, she's really walked into a complete and utter rabble. And I felt like she was quite reasonable in saying, we'll probably support a lot of those policies. We just can't guarantee it. And they can't also allow the Nationals just to have free reigning caucus, you know, voting against anything they want to vote against and, you know, on the floor. The Nationals, what they were wanting was not workable under. That's not a coalition. That's a unitary party within another party. That doesn't work.